I turned my mic off instead of on. Hi, Sam.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can see you and hear you, so hopefully our audience will be able to too.
Awesome. I found a quiet room. Got my headphones in. This is my lunch break, so I'm also having a sandwich, but I'll mute myself when I eat my sandwich. It's gonna be great.
Would Anne Bonny mute herself when she's eating her sandwich?
No, and you're right, and you should say it. You're right, and you should say it.
So yeah, so I think we're just waiting on Kendra, but I do want everybody in the audience to know that Sam is an absolute hero. She's doing this panel from a secret, quiet location in the middle of a live con at AwesomeCon. So thank you so much, Sam, for being with us today. I really appreciate it.
I'm so glad this could work out. I'm so stoked to be here, and I really hope to be at real in-person FlameCon. Hopefully next year. I would love that.
Yeah, I would be really excited to have you at live in-person FlameCon.
It'd be so fun.
So yeah. So for those of you who are in the room, just to make sure that you are in the right place, this is the Tell No Tales panel. And we're going to be talking about Sam and Kendra's book about one of my favorite queer pirates, Anne Bonny. So let's see. Let's give Kendra a couple more minutes. I haven't heard from them.
I'll text them.
Okay, awesome. If they're having technical issues, just let me know and we'll figure out how to get them in here.
Okay, I have texted.
Cool. I know they
posted.
They definitely retweeted my thing a half an hour ago saying that the panel was in a half an hour.
Right on. So they're on their way.
Yeah, they're on their way. Okay. So yeah, let's get started. Sam, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell everybody a little bit about yourself. Just so everybody here knows, I'm T Berry Blue, aka I am I'm the programming co-chair for FlameCon, along with Josh, who is running the captions for us. Thank you all for being here. Sam, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi everyone, I'm Sam Maggs, and I look funny because I did makeup only from here up and not from here down, because to be at the con today, I'm double masking, so no one here actually has to see the bottom half of my face, but you guys do, so this is not something I thought through in advance. So cool. I am an author, a writer. My day job is I write video games. I'm a writer for the new Call of Duty that comes out in November, which is about marginalized people murdering Nazis, which you love to see. I also write comic books like Marvel Action Captain Marvel, Star Wars Adventures, and many others, as well as novels like The Unstoppable Wasp, Built on Hope, Conquest, and my latest graphic novel through Abrams that I co-created with Kendra Wells, who is a wonderful angel of a talent and a great person, is called Tell No Tales, and it's all about queer pirates based on real people from the 18th century. And it was a lot of fun to work on. It's the story that I think I'm most proud of telling of all of the things that I've worked on. And I really love it. I'm really excited that you want to talk about it. So thank you for inviting us.
And I heard from Kendra, they're having technical issues logging in. So I'm asking somebody from FlameCon to help them get into the panel, and hopefully they'll be with us in just a second. So
cool.
Give me one second.
I'm happy
to send this message. Yeah. So in the meantime, why don't you tell us a little bit about Tell No Tales? Just tell us what the story is about.
Well, I'll give you a little bit of the origin story of how it came to be, and then what the story is about as well. So I wrote a nonfiction book called Girl Squads, which focused on teams of women throughout history who achieved greatness in like sports, politics, science, and one of them was martial skills adventuring, in which I included the story of real life pirates, Anne Bonny and Mary Read. And I had done a ton of research about the two of them in order to write this nonfiction profile on them. So interesting. And I was on Twitter one day. I've been friends with Kendra for many, many years, mostly through the internet. We met in person a couple times, and I saw them tweeting about how much they wanted to make a comic book about Anne Bonny and Mary Read. And I literally slid into their DMs and I was like, we're dead ass, like bet. So we decided to go for it. So we put a pitch together, some sample artwork, some sample pages, and Abrams picked it up. And what the story is about basically is Anne and her co-captain Reed, who in our version is non-binary, are basically they run a small pirate crew, including Mimba, who is their navigator and from a colony of escaped enslaved people in Jamaica. Sarah, who is their medic and who is based on a real person who is the half white and half black daughter of the sort of truly legitimate mayor of the Bahamas at that time. And Kati, who is their gunner and sharpshooter, and who is based on the indigenous peoples of the Mosquito Coast. There are sapphic relationships and queer relationships, and they basically have to fight off Woodes Rogers, who is English pirate captain and dastardly establishment white man who is attempting to ban pirates from the sea, and they're desperately trying not to get caught and taken back into a more like socially acceptable way of life. And I could talk for a million years about why pirates were so great and folk heroes and progressive, and I hope we can get into all of that stuff because I'm like such a huge pirate dork and I'm excited to talk about it.
So am I. I'm a huge pirate dork, and when I saw this panel proposal come in, I was just like, oh my gosh, it says they need a moderator. I want to moderate this.
Yes.
So yeah, so still trying to help Kendra get logged in. So I'm just gonna, I think in that case, let's talk a little bit about pirate dorkdom. So let's start with Woodes Rogers was a real person. He's hopefully not still alive. You want to tell everybody about how awful he was, because he was actually the absolute worst?
He was actually the absolute worst. He was a real, well, I feel like I'm going to back up a little bit and just talk about the fact that at this time, the English Navy needed more and more people to fill out the ranks to fight piracy, as well as ships from other nations like Spain, lots of like sea battles. And because being in the Navy was notoriously terrible, you had low pay. If you got injured, they were like, too bad. Lots of people died at sea of horrible illnesses or gangrene or scurvy. Like you never got any pay or residuals or a retirement. Like it was just not a great scene. The Navy was press ganging people, which you may have heard this term, which means they basically just like scooped up people off the street and they were like, you're in the Navy now, and there's literally nothing you can do about it, which was super awful. And so there were a ton of people who had been basically conscripted or forced or felt they had no other choice but to get into this life. And piracy offered a very appealing and viable alternative, because pirates were essentially the socialists of the sea at the time. They democratically elected all of their captains. They provided disability benefits to any of their crew members who ended up getting injured in the line of work. They were doing a very Robin Hood thing, like stealing from the rich, giving to the poor. The poor were mostly themselves, but still. And it also offered like a really wonderful alternative, or like a freedom or a more freeing way of life to people who would otherwise be stuck in roles that they didn't want to be stuck in. And we're not only talking about like white dudes in the British Navy who are like, I'm not getting paid a lot and I lost a leg and now I can't do anything for the rest of my life and I'll die in poverty, like that bad. But then also like women who were expected to not have a career, get married and have babies, and things were not always great. Pirates accepted women, they accepted escaped enslaved people, they accepted indigenous people. They basically it was completely democratized, and they would sort of welcome anyone into their ranks and treat them um, mostly equally and with respect. And so I loved the idea of, and by the way, people at the time also knew this, and pirates were folk heroes, especially in the colonies like the Americas, because we have to remember that pirates, as we think of them, this sort of golden age of pirates, really only existed from the year 1700 to the year 1720. It was a really short span of time. But of course, the French and American Revolution were knocking on the door. This is 40, 50 years later that the colonies are going to be who sucks? The British. So these colonies were looking at people like the pirates who were telling the royalty to stuff it and doing their own thing and being wow. And so pirates were really folk heroes to a lot of the more independent-minded colonialists who had come to make their own way in the world overseas. And the British government was very much we can't have that. This is making us nervous. So they launched a very sophisticated disinformation campaign to make pirates look less appealing and more evil, which is where a lot of our evil pirate stories kind of come from. This is not to say that pirates were great guys all around. They're, let's not put too rosy a sheen on it or anything, but the British monarchy was we can't have people identifying too strongly with pirates because then they might also rebel against us. So pirates were really these great socialist folk heroes. And then you had someone like Woodes Rogers, who was very much an establishment man. He ran an English Navy ship, and he was so bad at it. Stop me if you've heard this one before about the mediocre white man who is given a job that he's not qualified for and manages to totally bone it up. But he basically got his entire crew killed on 8 different occasions because he was just so bad at doing it, and he blamed all of his failures on pirates instead of on being just shit at his job, which is more what the actual truth was. And so he made it his life's goal to eradicate all pirates from the face of the planet. And he ultimately was with and other white people basically do that. But generally he blew.
Yeah.
That was a really long way of answering a very simple question. I'm very sorry, but I'm a dork about it. I'm telling you.
No. My favorite Woodes Rogers story is that there was this one point where he had lost so much money and so many men that he was in complete disgrace. He went to jail for a while, and then he wrote a book about how cool he was. And then the British government was like, oh yeah, this guy must be really cool. He wrote a book about how cool he was. And then they gave him a lot of money again.
This is true. This is every man I've ever worked with in video games who gets fired from some studio for being a sexist, and then is but hear me out, I'm awesome. And some other company is have your own studio. And they're anyway, video game.
We have Kendra, so I am getting Kendra up on stage. Okay. So yeah, because I would love for them to be able to commiserate.
Oh my god, Kendra is much more interesting than I am. So
oh, you're super interesting.
This is gonna be great. Oh, go on. Oh, they can't be a speaker on mobile.
Oh no. We're having additional tech issues. Oh,
oh, and their computer OS isn't high enough to run it.
Oh,
this is queer culture right here. We're all a bunch of disaster buys who made this book. Just a whole bunch of chaos, disaster bisexuals. Also queer culture. I am wearing a rolled sleeve Hawaiian shirt today to this convention. I'm living my best pirate life right now, I feel.
I'm wearing it's not really quite a Hawaiian shirt, but I'm wearing an olive oil a print button down.
I absolutely love this.
Yes. So yeah, okay, so let's see. I'm trying to figure out if there's a way that we can get Kendra on here. This might, Sam, do you have your phone with you?
Yeah, do you want me to FaceTime them?
Yeah, FaceTime them.
Okay. But
This
I
is
have
also
you
queer
on
culture.
speaker, so I'm going to take you. Hey, buddy. Hi. First of all, you look super cute. I have you on FaceTime here. I'm going to turn this. Can you guys hear them through my headphone?
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Are we good?
Yeah.
Are we functioning?
It's like they're here.
If anybody in the chat can't hear them, I apologize. It may not run. They may not get to the closed captions. But if anybody in the chat can't hear Kendra, let us know.
Some disaster with some queers, right?
We're so glad you're here. So yes, this is definitely.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can hear you. This is the queer culture version. This is also the pirate culture version, because this is what pirates would do in this situation. Okay.
It would make it work.
So now that you're both here. Oh,
okay, hang on.
Are we gonna?
I'm disconnecting my AirPods.
Oh, okay.
And I'm putting it on speaker. B, you might hear yourself through my computer now, but let's try that again.
okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm a little echoey, but we'll try to make this work.
I'll mute myself when you talk.
Sounds good.
So technology all day.
Okay, so now that Kendra's here, let's talk about how the two of you got together to make this book. And and basically why, Sam talked a little bit about why she wanted to tell this story, but a little more about why the two of you wanted to do this together, and I think a little bit more about what the book is about, and what what about Anne Bonny do we get to learn from this book?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of just this like divine stroke of inspiration. I think we were complaining on Twitter, as all great projects start, about how there was no there was no media that focused on Anne Bonny as a pirate, as a creator. Like, I know that she's in Black Sails and stuff, but she wasn't the main character, and we were kind of lamenting about the fact that, like, hey, where are all the queer female pirate stories? Like, where are they being told, and why aren't they being told? And then Sam DM'd me and was like, hey, do you want to do a book? And I was like, hell yeah. So it started there, and then it just kind of fell into place, like, sort of miraculously. It was amazing.
It was such a fun collaboration, and easy collaboration, because I had sort of come up with a bunch of generic outlines of our characters based on Sailor Scouts, because that's how I think of queer team ups of women and non-binary characters, is by there's.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Right?
Exactly. And then Kendra went away and made sketches of all the characters that I had sort of briefly outlined, and all of the original designs from the first were essentially perfect and exactly what ended up in the book. They just sprang. I mean, I hate writers who talk the whatever, but we just they just kind of existed. We knew immediately what we wanted, and it was
it's I still have I wish I could pull it up, but I still have the original character drawings that we did way back when we were just barely pitching the story around, and they changed approximately 0.5%. They really it came together so easily and so fast, and it was just all of the characters were so fully formed, based on Sam's writing. Sam's characterization was so on point that it was just immediate. It all came together so fast.
Well, and you're such a talented character artist that you were able to, all of their silhouettes are so differentiated, and you pull out all of their unique characteristics so well with just a glance. I don't know, I'm lucky to.
This is just a panel of us complimenting each other. I love you.
That's because you're both so amazing. I think one of the really interesting things, though, is that you decided to tell this story, which again, we've been talking about Black Sails, which is a really grim show. You decided to do this book for a young audience, and I would love to hear a little bit about how you made that decision, and how you translate these characters who were involved in some really brutal stuff into a book for younger readers.
Sam can kind of expand on this a little bit more, but I mean, pirate stuff, you know, I remember when the book was first coming out, we had some people being like, oh, like pirates are not nice and they're not for kids and whatever. And I'm like, pirates, they're like people love pirate culture. Kids love pirate culture. Look at the success of Pirates of the Caribbean. Like it's being a lonesome adventurer on the seas, having that freedom, having a cool sword or like a flintlock pistol and like a big hat. Like kids love that stuff. So it's not a hard pivot to making it kids media, I don't think. And also like, especially this book. I mean, this book is for kids of all ages and gender identities, but like primarily like you know, gender non-conforming kids and like little girls and everything, there's so little pirate media for them. It's kind of marketed as a boy thing. And like it's an easy niche to fill, you know, like what little kid doesn't want to go, well, I want to be on a big boat in the seas and have a cool pet and like, you know, adventure with all of my friends, you know, like it's I think it's a niche that needs to be filled. And it was very easy to kind of bring that energy to our kids, to Anne Bonny and her ragtag team of pirates.
Yeah, absolutely. And Kendra's right. We did get a lot of like, pirates aren't good role models for children. And it's like, I can think of no better role model than like a bunch of girls and gender nonconforming, like young teens who decide to say like, fuck the system and like do their own thing and make their own way in the world in whatever way they want to. That's the best possible role model to me. And if people are upset about that, perhaps this is not the book for you, and that's totally okay. Like
we gotta start these kids young and thinking, hey, actually the British Empire sucks.
Yeah.
You gotta get that grain implanted early.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, and this segues really, really well into the next thing that I wanted to ask you about, which is gender nonconformity, particularly in books for young female and female-read readers. You know, I think like for me, I was one of those kids who's totally gravitated to the girl dressing up as a boy, you know, stories. Yeah. And I think that's so true for a lot of queer women and a lot of non-binary people who were female assigned at birth. And one of the great things about this story and about Anne Bonny and Mary or Mark Reed, they were known by both names, is that, you know, it's a really interesting thing to look at is what's this difference between a girl who does gender non-conforming things and somebody who may be non-binary or transmasculine in a world where there's not really a visual way to signify these two things are different. Their external experience of the world is going to be really similar, but their internal experience is going to be really different. And I know that you decided to make Reed non-binary in the book, and I'd love to hear a little more about that.
Mostly talk about this, but I just want to say when writing about these characters in a nonfiction context, even though I read someone like Mary Reed as gender nonconforming or potentially non-binary, it's important to note that that language didn't exist in the 18th century. And so therefore, as a historian, it's irresponsible of me to assign modern language to a historical person that they would not have had access to in order to identify themselves. So the best that I can do in terms of nonfiction is say, like, to me, this reads as an experience that from a modern point of view, I would say correlates to being non-binary, being gender nonconforming. That's why with historical fiction, it's great to be able to be like, wow, we just say it's true and now it is. So that's me as the writer and as like someone who comes from a more historian research background. I just wanted to be clear about that. You know, like we can't know, but then we make it up and then we can do whatever we want.
Yeah, being obviously, it's hard to, especially, you know, like gender nonconforming and like trans people obviously existed, you know, in this time.
Yeah.
But especially coming from a person with a, you know, from Europe, like frankly, a white person from Europe is not necessarily going to have that language But yeah, I mean, it was really important to us. Like, I was also a kid who, like, I read a lot of Sailor Moon and Ron Mahaf and
Tamora Pierce.
And like all of these stories that happen to have a lot of gender fuckery going on. And like as a kid, I was just like, oh, I'm just really interested. Like, I don't know. I just think it's really cool. I just think it's cool how, like, you know, I didn't have the language for it when I was a kid. And the idea of making a book where the main character, like the, you know, one of the lead protagonists is an out non-binary person using they them pronouns. I mean, I'm giving myself goosebumps just thinking about it. Like, it's so cool to me to potentially have this book in the hands of young trans kids and young gender nonconforming kids who maybe don't have that language yet, and to plant that seed, to be, you know, to help them along on that path, and you know, to plant that seed of, even if it's just like it's in the back of their brain and they think about this later, you know, like, and it, maybe they get to adulthood and they come out and they go, oh, like that to me is awesome. Because I don't know how different my life would have been if I had explicit trans or, you know, gender nonconforming characters in the media I was consuming. I think that maybe it would have taken me, you know, still would have taken me 27 years to realize I was non-binary, but it would have, I think, impacted me in a really positive way. So it was really important to us not only to represent a broad range of female experience, but to represent like a leading character who is gender nonconforming and who is like very proud of that fact and very like, you know, very fuck you about it.
I love hearing Kendra talk about this because I'm a person who, like, I would never use the word woman to describe myself. It makes me want to vomit. And I'm in a phase right now where, like, wearing a skirt or a dress makes me want to throw myself off a bridge. But like, I'm very much we don't have time to unpack all that. Like, I'm very much there right now. And so it makes me wonder, like, if I had a book like this when I was a kid, like, it just, yeah, I don't know. I think it's really cool. Me as like a 32-year-old now, I'm still like, I don't know, man. Like,
it's a journey.
Yeah.
The journey never ends.
Yeah.
That's the crazy part, is that you're like, welcome to this road. It's cool. It doesn't stop.
Yeah. And it's the same with having bisexual characters in the book. Like, Anne very clearly has had a boyfriend before and is now dating Reed. And so is obviously like bi or pansexual, depending on like what language you prefer to use. I refer to myself as bisexual, whatever you're cool with, but I don't know, bi people didn't exist in media until like an hour ago, like approximately. So I also didn't.
Human history, it was like 15 minutes ago.
Like literally. So I also didn't know that I was like a bi person until I was in my mid-20s, and like, man, it really would have been nice to date the girl that I liked in high school instead of pretending that I liked her boyfriend or whatever.
Yeah, I was the president of the GSA as an ally. I just think that, like, gay people are so, like, all of my friends are gay. It's fine.
I get drunk at parties and I make out with girls, which is a thing that straight people do.
Yeah, this is very heterosexual.
Yeah, love this for
Straight
me.
people. So yeah, so I want to just, you mentioned Anne Bonny. Anne Bonny had a boyfriend who I assume is Jack Rackham.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So I mean, one of the things I love, so you know, and Sam may know this, but what Anne Bonny was like 15 years old, and she was married to this guy named James Bonny, who was the worst pirate ever. He was just really bad at being a pirate. And then she met Jack Rackham, who was actually a good pirate. He was good at being a pirate, and they kind of fell in love. And Jack Rackham went to James Bonny and was like, "Hey, I will pay you to divorce your wife." And he said no. And so then Jack and Anne ran away together anyway. And then Anne met Mark/Mary Reed, and they ended up in a relationship. And Jack was absolutely furious at first. He was like, "This isn't acceptable. You can't be in love with another man." And then Anne was like, "Okay, so I have to tell you something about this other man." And then they kind of clued Jack in on the fact that Mary/Mark Reed's gender might not be cis, even though they didn't have that word then. And then Jack was cool with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, oh, that's cool.
Ally.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Captain Jack Rackham was known as Calico Jack because he liked to wear very like flowery and flamboyantly patterned clothing, which is just like huge same. A mood.
Oh yeah. There's also a very good likelihood that he did sleep with Blackbeard at least once.
You love to see it.
Yeah.
Well, I was just gonna say that he also like canonically was like the most handsome pirate of the age. Like that's his legacy.
Yes.
And
He
maybe
was so pretty.
who knows?
He
Like,
probably did.
he's like, yeah, everybody's saying that handsome guy.
And he has great fashions.
He also, Jack Rackham is also, I think the other bigger part of his legacy is he's really the person who invented what we think of as Jolly Roger today. So, you know, the pirate flag with the cross swords or crossbones, he's really the first pirate who used those.
There's actually in to circle back around to the book itself, in the very first scene, Anne has Calico Jack's flag on her wall. I assume that she stole it.
Definitely. Yeah.
But like stole in that way where you like take your boyfriend's hat.
Or like favorite hoodie or whatever.
Like you steal his best hoodie when you break up.
Yes,
Like,
literally.
this is the tax. This is the toll.
Yes. Well, and like I think it was important for us to represent too, like our crew is all women and non-binary people, but also like, you know, Jack is there and he's trying and he fucks up. But
the number one thing we can say about Jack Rackham in this book is that he is there.
He's there and he does try, even if he's not like great at it. And I think that's an important thing to represent as well.
He's trying both senses of the word.
Yes.
So no, he there's what's the line? What did Anne say to him when he finally got hung?
If you had fought like a man, you wouldn't be dying
like a dog.
Yeah.
Coldest shit in the entire goddamn world.
Yeah, it's so hardcore. Yep.
Love that. I hope that I'm allowed to cuss on these panels. I'm sorry, I didn't even ask beforehand.
People cuss on these panels all the time. It's totally fine. It's, you know, we try to be relatively kid friendly, but it's also a queer show, and we assume queer kids are familiar with hearing a lot worse language. So, and some of it directed at them hurtfully. So,
Solidarity.
Yeah. So, you know, queer kids are allowed to swear when they, because there's a lot of big feelings. So.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, it's been a couple months since the book came out, and I still like, even just picking it up and flipping through it, it like warms my heart to see all of, like, I mean, we called them our kids for a reason. Like, I love like Kati and Mimba's relationship. I love Sarah as a whole, as a character. Her drive is so inspiring, and also like I deeply identify with being the mom friend. Like it's just it mattered so much to have this, like, and like Sam saying that the Sailor Moon Corps Sailor Scouts were a huge inspiration for this team. I mean, it makes a lot of sense, and also like, again, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But like it I feel like we did it was really important to us to represent a diverse group of characters, because like a lot of times in these like teen books or stories or, you know, TV or to one or two female or like trans characters, you're end up sort of in this space where you're like, okay, I'm not trying to represent everybody by these one or two characters, but I'm limited by what I can represent. And I think that it mattered a lot to us to have this group, you know, even with Jack, our token man, it mattered a lot to have like a diverse range of body types, a diverse range of experiences and histories and baggage. And I feel like it was really important to us to represent all of these characters as multifaceted, and you know, the word diverse gets thrown around a lot, and it's more than that. It's representing all of these people as fully formed human people. Mm-hmm. You know, like tokenization is only like it only becomes an issue when you boil someone down to being a, you know, flat single-sided character. When you're working with already this very like this enormously this enormous range of histories and backgrounds and stuff, it becomes very easy to be like, oh well, they're all just human people, and they all have their own issues and their own like character flaws and strengths, and it was so much fun to be able to explore that.
It was, and it's, it's exactly what Kendra was getting at, which is growing up, everything I watched was like a team of all dudes, and it gave ways that you could see to emulate to be a guy, which was like, you could be funny guy, you could be smart guy, you could be strong guy, you could be cool guy, and then you could be girl. Yeah, girl whose like defining characteristic is girl. And like, I think the reason Sailor Moon has stuck with me for so long is because, sorry, I'm in a convention center and the air is like just so dry. Is because there were suddenly represented all of these different ways to be a girl or a non-binary person, or, like in the case of Sailor Uranus, like it was suddenly like that. And that's what we really wanted to do with Tell No Tales, where, you have Sarah, the mom friend, you have Anne, who's impulsive and narcissistic and hot-headed, and you have Reed, who doesn't know who she is outside of Anne's shadow. And you have Mimba, who's quiet, but also has this like love of books, but a lot of pressure on her shoulders. And you have Kadi, who doesn't really, runs away from her own history because she doesn't feel any connection to it and doesn't know what that makes her. And I don't know, it just, there are all these different ways to be a human person. We are complex beings. And it's rare that you get to see that represented for women and trans kids,
I just want to let everybody know we have a little bit more than 10 minutes left. If you have questions for Sam and or Kendra that you would like to ask, there's a Q&A button on the right side of your screen, all the way on the right. And if you click it, there's a way for you to ask questions, and I will be able to repeat those questions. If you don't want to ask a question, but you want to vote on questions, you can also upvote the questions that you most want them to answer. So if everybody can put your questions into the Q&A, I have some more questions, and I can talk about pirates all day, but but we definitely want to hear from you all as well. So one of the things I would love to hear from you, because I know you did a lot of, I know, Sam, you knew a ton of this stuff already, but you both did a ton of research to make this book feel authentic. What are some of the coolest pirate facts you learned while you were writing this book?
This is such a good question. I love this. For me, I think it has to be that, well, this is like less of a pirate fact and more of like a historian research fact. I'm like a big dork about research and stuff. And basically I discovered that what we know of Anne Bonny and Mary Read comes mostly from one book that was written contemporaneously by a man. And in the first edition of his book, he's like, yeah, Anne Bonny and Mary Read, they were like cool pirate chicks. Second edition, it was like, and they made out, and then they'd like pull out their tits and be like, we're chicks or whatever. And in the first version of the book, yeah, in the first version, the woodcut has the picture of them, they're fully dressed, and in all subsequent version, like their tops are off. It's just like, so he like progressively sensationalized the story of the two of them. We have one news report, so we know that like, we know exactly what is kind of like true from the time, true in the sense, but yeah, he basically was like, how can I get more page views? And it was sensationalizing a queer relationship. Go figure.
We're all so familiar with that. So I have a question in the Q&A. Thank you, Kat, for putting the first question in the Q&A, which is, which characters do y'all identify with the most?
I mean, I know I already mentioned that I identify a lot with Sarah being the mom friend. Like my favorite characters in shows always end up being either the like tomboy or the mom friend. Like I love like Sailor Jupiter and I love Pearl from Steven Universe, but honestly, Anne is pretty high up there for me. I really identify with her. She's a lot bolder than I am, and she's got, big boots to fill, so to speak. But I really identify with I don't know. I also just love like flawed protagonists. I love that Anne is she's not a great person, you know, like, and not to say that she's like a villain or bad, but like you can see her grow throughout the book. But she starts out in a place where she's very cocky. She's, you know, you can see where she and Jack had a lot in common. You know, she is headstrong. She is bold to a fault, and she doesn't listen to her friends, and she doesn't listen to like you know, this idea. You know, she has a hard time balancing her desire to be a hero and a desire to be like this awesome, you know, badass pirate captain with not being a good captain, you know. And I think that you know, maybe in my own personal life, I don't necessarily know what it's like to be a pirate captain, but I really identify with that sort of needing to balance like what you want to do with what's the right thing to do.
I'm like half Anne and half Mimba, because on the Anne side, I'm like an impulsive, loud, redheaded narcissist. That's like half of me. I'm sitting with my friend who's like, yeah. And the other half of me is like a bookish introvert who never wants to speak to anyone ever and would like to be left alone to read silently in the bowels of a ship forever until I die. So like a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. I'm also very short. Mimba is very short, so that's a mood as well. But yeah, I wish I was more like Kati because she's so badass, and she's muscle.
Buff.
Yeah, she buff wife. Yeah, for sure, buff wife. But
lifting some cannonballs.
Now we're talking. Yeah. So yeah.
Folks, we need more of your questions in the chat, but in the meantime, Kendra, since you didn't get to answer my other question, what are some of the coolest things you've learned, pirate facts you've learned making this?
I don't know if this is cool to anyone but me, but when I was designing the characters, I was looking up, like researching a lot into like how many of the pirates of the age actually looked like, you know, Jack Sparrow pirates, and how realistic was that? And something that I learned that ended up being factored into my character design was didn't generally wear shoes on the boat. They weren't practical. They would get waterlogged, or they'd be difficult to, you know, climb up the ropes in and do all of that. So people generally were barefoot on the decks of the ship, unless pirate captains, it was considered very ostentatious and very show-offy to be always, like, they would wear them for like big meetings with other boats, you know, like they would wear, you know, these fancy boots to show off. And it was, I don't know how, I tried to have Anne in her boots in almost every single scene she was in, because I think that that's extremely her character. Her boots are slightly too big for her, and she's wearing them constantly. And I think that that's like a real glimpse into like the inner workings of Anne's brain.
Yeah.
Such a cool fact. That's really interesting. So yeah, you know, so now like I'm thinking about how like pirate shoe fashion would have evolved to like, you know, everybody's got their boots that are the ones that they want to wear. So I would actually have another question that's going to be mostly a Kendra question. Is there like a pirate thing that's really hard to draw, or a pirate thing that you really hated to draw?
The ships. I know that that's like 99% of a pirate story, but the ships are so hard.
I felt so bad because my job is like, and then a ship, period. And then I have to go to Kendra and they're like, ah!
It's a low angle.
I'm so sorry.
Sam, I love you so much. Pirate ships are so hard to draw.
Yes.
But so what I learned, I was actually talking to a good friend of mine, Wyatt Yates, who's another comics creator, and he is a big pirate nerd. And he gave me the best advice possible, which was, listen, when they built those ships, you see, like, it's just rigging everywhere. It's ropes going on every which way. Like, I really, really had to simplify to have any sort of legibility in the book. But he told me that, in all honesty, they didn't even know where half of those ropes were going. They were just strapping stuff down. there's like the function, there are certain functional like rigging and ropes and things that you definitely need to have that work, because like half the time they were just strapping everything to itself anyway to hold it in. So like, and also chances are the people reading this book are not going to go, hey, you're missing a rope on page 72. There's no way that this sail would function without this to this to this. So I had to simplify a little bit. I got pretty good at figuring out what goes where. But it was, yeah, pirate ships are hard to draw, man.
So did you ever like draw some ropes somewhere to cover up where you weren't sure what was supposed to be going on?
You can't expose me like this. I can't reveal all of my secrets. Listen, maybe a sail just happens to be in the way sometimes. Maybe a big pile of ropes just kind of goes all zigzaggy over a part that I don't feel like detailing so much. This is the magic of comics. It's finding shortcuts everywhere.
I'm running a little low on battery here, but I want to be able to answer this last question from Tiffo, which is what were my sources basically when researching for the book. And I would like everyone to know that in the back of Tell No Tales, there is an incredibly comprehensive bibliography that my friend is laughing at me. I'm a huge dork. That lists every single one of my sources for the books, including a lot of great resources, like secondary sources on pirates and pirate culture. I'm trying to remember my very favorite one. The Republic of Pirates by Colin Wood is fantastic. The Republic of Pirates being the true and surprising story of the Caribbean pirates and the man who brought them down, by Colin Woodard. And then I also really loved Under the Black Flag by David Cordingley, which is a book from 1995, which is also a really great nonfiction. And then obviously the original sources like the trial pamphlet from when Anne and Mary were in prison and all of that stuff are great. But yeah, those two books especially I love, but check the bibliography in the back, lots of great stuff if you're a real research dork like I am.
Yeah, thank you. Kendra, do you have any answers to used to learn things that you want to raise?
Sam is the expert. I did a lot of like Google image searching for like firsthand resources in terms of like costumes and like maps, and I wish I had like the notes here, but God bless the people online who offer free 3D SketchUp resources. The notes book, massively helpful.
Awesome. So yeah, so we're just about out of time. Thank you both so much for joining us today. Thank you, Kendra, for overcoming these ridiculous. Thank you, Sam, for overcoming the middle of your awesome con schedule. Why don't you tell everybody where they can find you online?
I'm at Kendra W. Candraw, all one word, everywhere, or you can just search me by name, Kendra Wells. My website, kendrawcandraw.com. I'm on Twitter, Kendra W. Candraw, Instagram, all of it.
Kendra W. Kendra. I always say Kendra.
Kendra, yeah. Kendra.
Interesting.
Not Kendra Ravenclaw, not Kendra WWW or whatever. It's too long. It's hard to remember.
I'm just my name, Sam Meggs, 2 M's, 2 G's on Twitter and Instagram. I'm Sam Writes a Lot on TikTok, where I waste a lot of my time. Please pick up Tell No Tales. We really love it. And we are so grateful to be here today talking about it with you guys. It's the thing I think we have made that we are both most proud of in the whole world at this point. So
it was a real labor of love, and it means so much to have everybody's support on it.
Thank you, T. You were so great.
Oh, thank you. You were both great. This was a super fun conversation. I'd love to talk to both of you about pirates anytime. For everybody everybody who joined us, thank you so much for being here. This video will be available on YouTube probably in a month or two for if you want to like share it with people. And and please join the rest of our awesome presentations and visit our exhibitors on the exhibitors floor. Thanks, Sam. Thanks, Kendra. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. To navigate out of this room, just use the back button on your browser. And we'll be back in a few minutes with another panel.